Today we're going to learn how to make custom molds so that you can cast your own resin shapes. This is really cool, Andrew. What a great idea.
Oh, thanks for having me back, and I'm happy to share. So the first thing that we do is we pick our molds, or we make our masters rather, I made these out of polymer clay, and you can use found objects if you aren't a sculptor.
I like what you did. This is a really simple shape that even I could do. I'm not a sculptor, but I think I could handle it.
Yeah.
But I also like using stuff that I find, like keys and other things to make molds out of. Okay,
and so the next thing we're going to do is make a mold. And what we're going to use is this mold putty. And the mold putty is a two-part mold mixture, and you need equal parts.
Okay.
So I'm just going to grab a glob of the part A and part B.
Okay, and we should remind people that when you're using found objects, don't use other people's work.
Yeah.
Like pendants or special things that you find that an artist made. It's not okay to replicate that.
No, it's always good to respect the artist and not get into legal trouble. So what I'm going to do is I've got two about the same size pieces of the mold putty, and I'm just going to mix this until it's consistent throughout and you can't see the two colors, so it'll all be one color.
Okay.
Once we do this, we kind of have to work a little bit quickly because it sets up pretty fast. And one of the things I like to do is get it nice and smooth so that when we put it over the object, the master that we're going to be using, there isn't a crease in it.
Okay.
All right, so I just press it down so it's roughly the same shape as that. Okay. And then press it on top.
And we should mention that you already baked your clay.
Yes,
so
this is
completely ready.
Yeah. And then I flip it over and see where that's kind of thin like that. You just smoosh the clay around so that the wall is a little bit thicker on that side.
Okay.
And then so I also like to pinch around the edge, and this will help if you overspill on your resin. And while that's setting up, I'm going to show you how to do the resin pouring.
Okay.
So I'm going to put gloves on, and I also want to say that whenever you're using resin, to read the instructions because all the different resins are different.
Yeah, and they have different safety precautions too, working in a well-ventilated area and all those kinds of things, and how long it takes to set up.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
When I was a kid, we had resin and we poured it in the closet, which was probably not such a good idea.
So that's what happened.
So don't do that. So one of the things we're going to do is find the graduated cup. And these are nice because they've got a little spigot at the end, and you just squeeze out the amount you need.
Okay, and this is a type of resin that sets up pretty fast, right?
Yes, this is a fast set resin.
Okay.
So through the course of this segment, we're actually going to be finished.
Over here for you.
I kind of got that a little too quick. What we're going to do first is we're going to take a metallic pigment powder and just slightly brush it inside of the mold.
All right. So you're even starting to embellish your piece before you have the finished.
Mm-hmm. And you can do patterns if you want. I'm just going to give it a good brush and then tap out any excess powder.
Okay.
Because the more powder, you'll get air bubbles. And also for this, we're going to be setting these in bezels, but I thought I would use a bigger piece so that you can clearly see it. So then you get the part B.
Okay.
And you look at what's called a meniscus, which is the kind of curvature of the line of the top of the surface of the liquid. Now, when you're mixing resin, you want to make sure that you do so thoroughly, scraping the sides and scraping the bottom as well.
Okay. And you're moving very deliberately. You're not whipping it up.
No, if you whip it, it will create air bubbles. So right now, it's kind of got a milky look to it. We're just going to stir it until it's clear throughout.
And the mold that you're using, you already prepared, so it's totally dry before you start.
It takes about 20 minutes for the mold putty to cure. completely. I like to give the mold about a day or two to off gas if it's going to.
Okay.
All right, so this is pretty well stirred throughout. So I'm just gonna set that aside and pour it in.
Okay. Cool.
Now, I always have an extra mold on hand just in case I have more resin. And
That's a good idea. So you're all set up before you start pouring.
yeah, and this will just be a plain one.
Okay.
All right, and so speaking of what you're gonna do, what you can do with the pieces of resin after they're finished, there's a couple different surface techniques. If we wanted to add color to the resin, we could use this dye. And so while it's clear, what I'm gonna do is just add a drop to the tip of the stirrer and mix it in.
Oh, okay.
And there's different, this is with the pigment powders. This is the clear resin, and the clear resins usually take a little bit longer to set up, usually 8 hours or so. This is Gilder's paste. I've got acrylic right here.
Now on the Gilder's paste one, did that start out white? And then you buffed it onto the surface? Okay.
Yeah, and it's a great way to bring out highlights or accents and kind of bring out the sculptural elements of your resin piece. This is glitter. And this is alcohol ink. Now, this last piece is a combination of techniques. So it's got first the alcohol inks, and then a little bit of the acrylic, and then to top it off, I used a little bit of Gilder's paste.
Nice, so you can combine them all together and get different effects. That has a really beautiful patina on it too. Yeah.
And one thing that I like to do while I'm experimenting with the finishes is keep a little sketchbook nearby, because it's easy to forget the steps that you're doing. So it's almost like a cookbook.
That's a great idea. That would be a wonderful, I'd love to see that cookbook someday. You should put that together, Andrew.
So when you're looking at this, you'll notice there's a little bit of air bubbles. Some people will breathe on these. Since we're not really using these, since it's going to be opaque and you're not going to see it, it doesn't really matter that there's a lot of air bubbles.
But if you wanted to take care of them, you would breathe on them?
Yes, and here you can see right here it's starting to cure. So it's a chemical reaction.
Oh yeah, look at that. It's totally getting opaque before our eyes. That one is doing it now too.
Yep. And you can see how it popped the bubbles a little bit.
About how long is that going to take to set up totally?
5 to 10 minutes.
Wow, it's fast.
And I've noticed that when you've got more liquid or more resin, it sets up faster. So if you spread this thin, it actually sets up slower. And I guess it's a chemical reaction.
Okay.
So while that's finishing setting up, this should be almost ready. You can test it to see. It's a little sticky, so I don't want to demold it quite yet. But in the meantime, well, you can tell that it's not fully set up because it's got a little ring of the liquid resin around it.
Yeah, you can see the clear part separating.
Yeah, so in the meantime, we're going to take a little bit of Gilder's paste. I usually just use my finger. I know you're not. You should use a little towel or something, but you just take your piece. This one has already been dipped with a little bit of alcohol ink, and then you just rub it on, and it helps bring out the highlights in the piece.
Yeah.
And then we'll take one of these bezels. I love this bezel because it gives a little bit of a finishing touch. And it kind of polishes it up a little bit.
Yeah, it makes it feel weighty too, a little more substantial, I guess.
Yeah, and when you do that, you can easily incorporate it into jewelry by just adding an ear wire or put a jump ring on it and put it into a necklace design or a bracelet design.
Okay. These are some beautiful samples that you made here. Now, do we have to worry at all about the durability of the resin piece?
It's really hard. Once it fully cures, you can sand it and drill it. And so if you don't use the bezel, then you can drill a hole with a Dremel tool or a Fordham.
Oh, okay.
And you can use it as a bead or a pendant that
Okay,
way.
well, let's go ahead and glue one of those hearts in here, if that's okay.
Okay, so this is a gel super glue, and it's nice because it doesn't run everywhere and get all over your fingers. And
So you just do a small amount.
Yeah. And then I've trimmed this so that it will fit right in there. And then on the website, there'll be more information on how to make your masters so that they fit your bezels.
Oh, okay.
And
Some
that's,
secret tips for that.
Yeah.
Sizing and shaping.
yep. And that's why that fits snugly.
It's perfect. Very good. Well, do you want to show us just trimming around one of these so that we can get that hang
Sure.
of how you clean those up when they come out?
Now, this is just a mat cutter. You can use an X-Acto knife, or if you're more skilled than me, you can use a razor blade. Now, when it just comes out of the mold, it'll be still pliable. When it cures, it's a little bit harder, but you just trim around the edges like so.
Okay.
And then at this point, when you do demold it, see how it's kind of a little bit gummy? We'll let that cook a little bit more.
Okay. All right. So you just trim it up. Now, you could also file this, right?
You could file it. If you do file it, you want to do it in a well-ventilated area because this is a plastic and you don't want plastic dust in your lungs. So do it outside.
Now, can you also use the same type of resin for casting sculptures? I know you make other types of art as well. How big can you go with this? I mean, we're working on a really micro scale here to make jewelry.
You can go pretty large. The one drawback about using the mold putty is that it has to be flat on one side.
Okay.
Unless you did two pieces and you glued them together. If you were going to do more sculptural pieces, you'd want to use a two-part mold, or even more complex than that, depending on how detailed your pieces are.
Okay. How's it going?
It looks like it might.
Looks pretty close.
Close, but not. Oh,
there you go.
So it just, it's slightly tacky in there, so I don't know. Let's give it a minute more.
Oh, that one's
Okay.
looking good.
So you can see how it's releasing from the sides. Usually I just make this and walk away and
Oh, you
then-
don't want to mush it. Wait a little
Well,
longer?
here's a bad
Oh.
example. Because it's good to have bad examples sometimes. There, you can see how the mold, we released it too soon, so it's kind of gummy on this. And if you wanted, you could shave that off. You could take more paint or powder and then just go around the edges.
I used to work for a publishing company, and we did a lot of craft projects there. And one of the designers told me that the way you know you're a real designer is you know how to fix every single mistake.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I'm getting there.
Here we go.
I've made a lot of mistakes.
So have I. Once this fully cures, then I'm just going to go over with warm soapy water, and that'll take off any of the excess of the pearlescent pigments. So maybe this one won't be so gummy.
Maybe it just needs a little longer.
A little bit longer.
Oh, that's pretty good. That looks good. Now, what about
Thanks.
using these molds again? Are we going to wash these up then in soapy water, or how do we take care of like some of the remaining pigment and other things that are inside?
Usually, if you let it set up completely, it should just pull right out.
Totally clean.
And you can reuse these molds dozens and dozens, hundreds of times.
Okay.
So this one is not quite fully set up. And you can tell because it's still pliable.
Okay, and what about this guy that still has some pigment in there? Think we could wash it out?
We could probably wash it out.
Oh, look, it comes right out.
Yep. You can even, if you're frugal like me, you can even save your cups. And you just scrape the resin out. I would leave it a little bit longer so that it pulls out just like a little skin.
So let it completely set up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see a few of these different effects on some of these guys that are part of the way done.
Okay, so with this one, we just did alcohol inks. And to get that effect, all I did is just take a drop of alcohol ink and put it right there. And you can mix the colors.
That looks good.
Thanks. And then with this guy, I had just put a little bit of gilder's paste, and I just smear some on.
Nice.
And that really helps bring the
What about
color
using
out.
acrylic paint over the top of this? Can you do that once it's done, or is that a process that you do while it's still in the mold?
You can use acrylic paint. I would recommend doing it after it has been cured, because if you do it while it's still wet, anything that you add to it, unless it's specifically designed for it, or as a dry substance, it will cause the chemical reaction to be off and not have it set
Okay,
up.
so it wouldn't completely dry. Now, would you seal this when it's finished, or would you just leave it?
Well, the nice thing about this is that it's a colored wax, so you can use it as finished as it is, but you can also seal it, so it's just a personal preference.
Okay, so if you want it shiny, it's an acrylic sealer of some kind, and if you
Yeah.
want it matte, then the gilder's paste is just enough of a seal, right?
Yeah, and if you're really concerned, you can go over it with a Renaissance wax,
Oh, okay.
which is a petroleum-based wax that was developed by the British Museum to
Preserve art?
preserve their armor.
I did not know that.
Pretty cool. They used to use beeswax, so.
No, they're on to the next. They're moving with the
Greatest thing.
times. Let's take a look at your earrings. I love the idea that you could take this to a lot of different levels. You've got it really simple here.
Yeah.
Like you said, you just attach an ear wire to the top of the bezel.
Yeah.
And then on the bracelet, same idea. You have
Yeah.
your little guy in the center.
Well, the nice thing about this is that it's perfect for production. So if you need to get a lot of pieces that are consistent and you need a lot of them, you can use these molds and set up an assembly line and pour, and be done.
Yeah, so you're getting ready for a holiday sale, or you're selling your jewelry at a big level. You can
And
just create
bridesmaids
lots and lots.
jewelry.
That's a good idea for bridesmaids jewelry. That would be fun.
Or gifts for teachers.
Yes,
Make them into
everybody needs
magnets.
those. And this necklace is over the top. I love this.
Thanks.
You're welcome. This is so
Thanks.
pretty. And what was your color inspiration for that?
Well, I'm a big fan of tourmaline, and I love watermelon tourmaline with the pinks and the reds and the greens.
That's a
and
perfect representation of those colors.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks. There's vintage check glass, and there's some lamp work by Ren Farnsworth, and
It's really pretty. I think
Thanks.
using the pieces that you set in the bezels too, they blend right in,
Yeah.
but it really puts your handmade touch on it. Because
well, I love the way you can use these bezels because they are a great way to incorporate your work, and makes incorporating it into finished jewelry a lot easier.
well, and it looks really good when you're finished too. Let's
Yeah.
take a look and see if our mold is ready.
Okay, let's pop it out. There we go. Now, I would probably give it a little bit more time before we pour resin in it.
Okay, so maybe let it sit a while and then we're ready.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks, Andrew. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I want to try this.